engagement there.
You're listening to Head South Radio with your host, Cat Meyer, a podcast dedicated to prioritizing pleasure and removing the stigma and shame around sex. We're here to be curious and have an open conversation about sexual health and relational wellness. This podcast is intended for educational and entertainment purposes. The information discussed is not a substitute for professional medical advice.
Hi there, I'm Cat Meyer, and this is Head South Radio. This is a little preview episode that's about your host, me. And so I've invited my friend Gina on to help interview me so we can kind of get through and introduce me as the host of Head South Radio. So take it away, Gina.
Hi, everyone. I am Ginaschiappacasse. I am a former colleague of Kat's from our days working at a company called Hair Story together, which was a pretty incredible creative mecca. And we had some great times producing photo shoots and content and making hair products and giving people really cool haircuts. So I have been a longtime friend and fan of Kat's, and I'm really excited for her to embark on this new endeavor. And I have not heard any of the podcasts yet, so I can't wait for that to come out.
Cool.
So I guess we will jump in, and I think we're going to start off with like a rapid fire round of true and false questions to get warmed up.
Yeah.
So Kat, I hope you know enough about yourself to get these get these right. Let's see. We'll start right out the gate. Your name is Kathleen Meyer.
True.
True or false?
Yeah. True.
You were born on 21st of July, 1984.
Yes, that's true.
So that would make your sun sign Cancer, and you share your birthday with Pamela Anderson and Debbie Harry.
True for the first part. I am a Cancer, but I'm a Cancer cusp Leo, so I identify with both. And then actually, I don't share birthdays with either of those people. I do believe Pamela Anderson is a Cancer, though. I share a birthday with Robin Williams and Cat Stevens. Those are my celebrity birthday people.
That's solid company to keep.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Cancers are good ones. Cancers are known for their mothering nature, nurturing, they're warm, they're careful, they're intuitive and joyful. Or would you say that's true or false?
I'd say that's true about me. Yeah. I identify with all of those characteristics. They're not bad ones to have.
I'd say knowing you, those are all very true facts.
Mm-hmm.
So sexually, Cancer women are surprisingly freaky. I did not know this. Leaning a bit on the submissive side, they will find excitement if you take control, dominate, and surprise them. Is this true or false?
I would say that's true. I think a lot of people perceive Cancerians because there's a bit of shyness or reserved privacy type energy. I feel like a lot of Cancers I know, we keep things close in the shell as a crab, but I definitely think sexually we do like being a bit more submissive, but also exploring in ways that maybe aren't so extroverted. It's very implicit, the Cancerian's sexuality, but it's definitely, it can lean freaky or not freaky. I would use more of the word of like, it can lean more kink or a little bit more exploratory and curious than what people would normally expect seeing and experiencing Cancers socially.
Sure, that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like I could listen to an entire podcast on like astrology and sex. I think like maybe there's a spinoff in your future there.
Definitely. I have a book about, it's very funny. It's a book about astrology and sexuality, and it was written in the 70s. So it has a very 70s skew, but definitely I do have a few friends who work with astrology, and I would love to do an episode specifically on how our signs and the zodiac influence our sexual expression or sexual expressions.
Yeah. Super cool stuff.
Yeah.
Moving on. You've hosted 2 podcasts before. True or false?
False. This is my first rodeo. This is my first time doing this. So it's very exciting and nerve-wracking. And I feel very vulnerable. Yeah. It's a very vulnerable space to be in to do this. And also this part, like this is not my idea. This is Megan, our editor's idea to do this version of the podcast. And so it's definitely taking a big leap into a space that I'm not very familiar with, which is putting myself out there.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think we're all curious though. Like the person hosting, if you're a good and compelling host, we want to know your backstory here.
Mhm. Yeah.
Um,
I do agree with it, but I'm just like, "Ugh," like very hesitant about it. But I'm here. We're doing it.
we're doing it.
Yeah.
Listen, the beauty of having an editor is that if you feel like it didn't quite make the cut, you can tweak things as needed.
Mhm. Yep.
Okay, true or false? You are an only child.
No, it's a big false. I'm the opposite. I'm one of 7 children. I have a giant family.
Yes, that one I
Yes.
definitely knew. Cat, you have like you have a million siblings, and then
Yeah.
they all have children, like the biggest family.
Yeah. And both my parents have millions of siblings as well. So it's just family on family on family. So definitely not an only child.
True or false? You are a sex therapist.
False. So I'm definitely not a sex therapist. I would love to become one day. That's on my list of goals.
That sure would be a fascinating job.
Mm-hmm.
I guess this one is a bigger Q&A. Which of the following have you previously done for work? We're going to go down the list.
Okay.
Yoga teacher,
Yes.
hairdresser,
True.
ski lift operator,
True.
barista,
False. I've not done that.
content producer.
True.
I knew the answer to that one. Dental assistant?
False. But I do have a love of oral care. Like I really do appreciate dental care.
That is so specific.
Yeah. I appreciate dental care. So
Who would have guessed? Fun facts about Cat Meyer.
Yeah.
Magician.
No, false, but I do think I work with magic. So yes, a magician, but not what we think as a magician, not a performer, but someone who works
Not in
in
the
magic.
traditional sense, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah.
Car washer.
Yes, true. I washed cars in college.
Retail manager.
True. I also was a retail manager at the same time.
Last one, burlesque dancer.
No, I've never done that, but I would love to learn the art of burlesque.
All right. Add it to your very long list of careers.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Are we feeling warmed up?
Yeah, I feel good.
Okay. Let's start with the big questions. Right at the gate. Who was your childhood crush?
My childhood crush, a celebrity, was Tom Hanks from Big. That was like the first one. I remember like referring to him as my husband. And Mickey Mouse. Like I would be making dinner with my mom and be like, my husband's coming home soon. And I was referring to Mickey Mouse. So those were 2.
Oh my goodness.
Those were my celebrity crushes as a child. And then I would say, in real life, my first crush was a boy in preschool named Ernie. But then I was like completely mortified because my siblings would call me Bert because I had a unibrow. And so,
Oh my God.
like that will stay with me till I die of my siblings calling me Bert because I had a crush on a boy named Ernie. So that was my first crush, like in real life human. And then I feel like, growing up in the 90s, definitely like the Devon Sawas. That was a classic, crush. Watching Little Giants over and over. And Casper.
And on all those like teen beat posters,
all over my bedroom. Yeah. I was definitely like the show Pen 15.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was definitely that. I was the epitome of a 90s teen girl for sure.
I mean, on that note, I think this question is one of the most interesting ones on the list, just because you and I have had conversations about it before. And I think it's such a hot button topic in America, but what was sex education like for you?
So sex education was definitely the video. So I remember I went to a Catholic school for grade school and junior high. And so in 6th grade, I remember we all had to bring slips home to our parents. They had to sign off on it. They separated us into 2 separate rooms, like gendered. And so the boys went in the 5th grade room, the girls went to the 6th grade room. And we watched a video, and it was very much like an late 80s, early 90s, after school special kind of video. And I remember they had different girls between the ages of probably 12 to 14 talking about their periods. And I remember I had already gotten my period.
So you're like, wait a second,
Yeah.
that's what that was.
Yeah, this is happening. On one of the podcast episodes that we've already recorded, I spoke about how I didn't know what went on in the other room. Like, I still don't know what went on in the other room and like what the boys watched. I do know, I'm assuming that they talked about erections, because it was it was a puberty based sex education. In high school, our gym teacher, it was pretty much straight out of the Mean Girls scene of like a gym teacher, don't have sex, use protection, here's a condom on a banana, and that's about it. And like sign off on this, like having a sign off that we got sex educated, but there wasn't any in-depth education. And that's where I was very frustrated in high school about like not knowing and not understanding, like just things, simple things, and not just sex as in penetrative sex, but all the other sex acts that one can experience. You don't learn about any of that at all. Like none of that's talked about.
I mean, I think that was probably everybody's experience in America. Like it just was so limited. We had an STD slideshow in gym class and an abstinence lecture from some man who had no qualifications or affiliations with our school district, who was obviously really conservative and religious, and talked about how he waited till marriage with his wife.
Yeah.
That was our public school education on sex. I mean, we had something in middle school or in elementary school about periods and how your body worked. But the fact that like everything was a mystery, and then it's amazing because especially in Western culture, sex is on television, it's everywhere, it's talked about. And then your understanding of it is so stunted as a kid because you're hearing everybody talk about it, but you have no idea what they're talking about because no one's actually given you a real education in it.
Right. Mm-hmm. And there should be opportunity for like continued education. So if you think about it, like that's probably the last time any of us have been educated on sex. Some people are lucky enough to have a relationship with their doctors or healthcare providers where they can communicate about that, or you get to a certain age where you start thinking about fertility or family planning, and so you have certain conversations. But outside of that, no one's talking about the long-term, road of sexual health.
Yeah. And I think it goes so hand in hand with like therapy and communication and all these things that we're all, I think, hopefully starting to get more comfortable with culturally.
Yes. Yeah.
That was like one of the other questions on our list is, what is your view on therapy? And I think that ties in in such an interesting way to sex too.
Yeah. I think especially in the past 2 years, as I've been exploring this and working on Head South, I've recognized the connection of our sexual health and how it's connected to our mental health, our physical health and well-being, our energy, our emotions, and our relational well-being. So it touches on all these different aspects. And I think as a society, people are more and more drawn to their well-being and wellness, and especially in certain areas and demographics and geographic locations, people are really passionate about how they can still be productive and doing things to improve their mind, improve their body, working. I work, as a yoga teacher, so working in the wellness sphere. And I recognize that with sexual health, it touches on all of those things. And yet it's not been prioritized as something as important as all of these other categories. So like some people will pursue therapy for their mental health, and then you'll go to a yoga class for your physical health. But the sexual health is connected to both of those. I think more and more people need to talk about that because then it affects your relational well-being. So how you relate to the world, how you relate to your partners. So I think I love therapy. I love my therapists and the people I've worked with. I think it's so important for people to have that resource and access to therapy at all ages. And also, I think it's important for people to pursue therapy and couples therapy or counseling way before people actually do. I think most people look at couples therapy as a resource when the relationship is already broken. You're already heading down that path. I've heard that from a lot of couples therapists of
Last
couples,
resort.
the last resort, and like now we're doing this, or like to save the marriage. But I forget who it was. It probably was Esther Perel, but it was someone who had said, if you look at your relationship like a car, you wouldn't drive your car all the way down to the tires were worn out and you ran out of gas. Take your car in and get the oil checked. You rotate your tires, you fill the tires with air, you fill your car with gas. And oftentimes, if it's a really good car, you fill it with the best kind of gas, and you clean out your car, you wash your car, you do all the things and care for your car. And that's how we should be looking at our relationships.
I love that. And I love that comparison. I think it's just like a toolkit, right? It's just like looking at it as a way of like, you have a healthier relationship with anyone if you learn how to communicate better and more openly and in an environment that feels safe and trusting. And I think therapy gives you the tools to do that.
What I look at therapy as is like, it's a way of learning emotional intelligence, learning communication. Yeah. It's the skills that we don't learn that we should be learning, of like how to self-regulate, how to communicate. And instead of looking at it as like the stigma of like a shrink trying to fix me, there's something wrong with me. It's not that process. And so I'm a big fan of therapy as a modality, as a tool in the toolkit, because it's not just that. Like, it's not like, oh, therapy is going to fix everything. There's so many other things that you have to bring into your life to work and be a human.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. I think that's a nice segue into our next question, which is, have you ever been in love before? And if so, how many times?
I have been in love before. I've been in love a few times. I would say that as I've grown, I've learned that there's all different types of love and ways of expressing and sharing love and receiving love. And so I would say that the love that I experienced when I was in my 20s is a very different love that I've experienced in my 30s and now almost in my 40s. And I think part of that evolution of that experience is also how I love myself. I also feel like I've been in love, romantic love, a few times, but also I have appreciated the expansiveness of love and loving my platonic friends and loving my community in different ways too. So like experiencing and expressing love has evolved and changed for me.
That's good. I think everybody should have that. That feels like a basic human right to me. Mm-hmm. I love that. I think you've been sharing stuff on, well, you always share great things on Instagram, but there was one the other day that was like, tell your friends you love them often, make it awkward.
Yeah. I've seen that post, and I'm a big fan of that belief of like, in recent years, especially since the pandemic, have started saying I love you the way that I would say I love you to a partner, to my friend, and like making eye contact and making it real and being very genuinely heartfelt I love yous to everyone I love, rather than just saving that for just a romantic partnership. Because I think a lot of people do that. Like, we believe that we have to reserve that type of love for the person that we sleep with, the person that we live with. And that's great. It's great to have that, but you can have that type of love beyond what we socially believe is just the romantic, monogamous partnerships. That kind of love can spread beyond that, or even just the familial, like the way that you say I love you to your mother. You can say that to a friend and it's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I like it. I'm a fan. Can you describe your first time having sex?
Okay. Okay.
I'm just gonna go there.
Yeah. Sure. I mentioned this in the first episode of the podcast. I had a conversation with someone and I had a really great experience or understanding of like, I knew when I wanted to have sex, and I very clearly expressed that to my mother when I was 17. Like, she picked me up from my swim practice and I knew the person I was dating, we were going to be having sex soon. Like, I don't know, it could have been 3 weeks, it could have been 3 months. It was at some point in the near future. I was ready to have sex with this person. And so I expressed that to my mom on the car ride home. And so I asked to see our gynecologist and have a conversation with them about what my birth control options were. So she made me make the appointment. My mom was very like, well, if you're going to make this adult decision, then you got to be the adult and make the phone call to make the appointment. And so we went, and I remember the gynecologist's office was attached to my pediatrician's office, like where I went to see my pediatrician. It was in the same facility. And I'd been in that gynecologist's office pretty much since I was 4 years old, because when my mom was pregnant, we would go to that office. So I was very familiar with that doctor's office. And we went into his office. It was a big, mahogany wood paneled, very 70s, like it looked like the Brady Bunch house. And he had a brown leather chair, like very wood and brown and warm. And we talked about birth control options and protection. And I got put on a birth control because I wanted to be on birth control well into it, like for a while before I had sex. Like I wanted to. Yeah. So then my first time having sex was on Valentine's Day.
Oh, cute.
I was in high school, and we watched American Pie.
Oh my God.
American Pie. And then we had sex, and that was my first time having sex. It's so funny.
And had you had conversations with your partner prior to this? Like, had you guys talked about having sex?
Yeah. So definitely when I spoke to my mom, I had already had conversations with the partner at the time. And then like, that's why I spoke to my mom, because we kind of knew that's the direction we were going in. And then I would say if she was picking up from swim practice, that was probably in December, January, February. It makes sense that then a few months later, I would have already been on birth control and made that decision to do that after watching American Pie.
That's so mature. I feel like that you had a conversation with your partner and then your mom. I feel like most teenagers fumble through that and screw up because there's no sex education. If you want to have sex, be careful, use protection, get on birth control. Like nobody tells you those things in public school. So I feel like that was very mature of you.
Yeah. So that was
I guess we'll keep going on this theme. Where is the most interesting place you've had sex?
Oh boy. Okay. So that's
I'm excited for this one.
Okay. So I mean, I've had sex in fields, in open spaces. I've watched shooting stars having sex, as one does in the country in Pennsylvania. Like in
I guess, yeah, you're getting out of your parents' house. And
no, yeah, I've had, I mean, those are pretty interesting and beautiful spaces. I like having sex outdoors, in open spaces and seeing the sky. I have had sex on a car in the rain. Like on top of the roof of a car in the rain was one interesting experience. And then, I've had sex. Well, this is also a weird one because this was not the same person, but I've had sex on the roof of my high school, but with a different person later on in the spring, after I'd broken up with the other guy. The roof of the high school, and then also in the teacher's lounge bathroom, not with a teacher. So I have to clarify this, because when I was playing like a game of truth or dare, like one of these kinds of games, and with a group of friends in Mexico, and said that I had the weirdest place I had sex was in the teacher's lounge bathroom. They were like, "Did you have sex with a teacher?" I did not. It was with a fellow student. We hooked up in the teacher's lounge bathroom. So those are some of the more I don't even know how to describe it, but crazier risque places.
That's a good list.
Yeah, but I do enjoy having sex in open outdoor fields and spaces and like the desert and stuff like that. I do like being in nature and having
very
sex.
liberating.
Yeah. So yeah. Ooh, now I'm sweaty.
Oh boy. Okay. Well, we'll keep it rolling. On that topic, also, what is something that you haven't explored sexually that you would like to explore?
I've explored a lot of things that I've wanted to. I feel like I don't really have anything on like a wish list. I think I've recently explored kink and bondage, and rope tying. And so I actually, there's going to be an episode of that on the podcast where I talk with my friend who I did a workshop with.
I've always been intrigued by that because it's so beautiful too.
It's such an artistry, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. And we'll talk on the podcast episode that's with my friend Tommy. I think that's going to be episode number 2. we talk about our experience in the workshop and how that felt. And so that's something I definitely have been exploring more for myself. And it's been a lot of fun. And it's an artistry. I think if I could say that if you enjoyed making friendship bracelets as a kid, it has the same. There's the same kind of meditative experience I have, both
Yeah.
tying someone up, and it's a very vulnerable space and also a very safe experience, where you just surrender, but you also, as the person tying somebody up, I feel like kind of a privilege to be able to do that and to be able to hold someone in their vulnerability.
Yeah.
And then also the trust to allow someone else to do that to you. And so that's been where I've been playing and leaning into more of the kink curiosity that I have.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You have to have such a strong foundation of trust and like communication and I feel
Mm-hmm.
like even explore stuff like that. It's very
Yeah.
special.
Yeah. No, I really appreciate it as an art form and as an experience. It's been very liberating. Considering it's a constricting practice, it's also very liberating.
That's cool.
Mm-hmm.
How about moving into music? Sex
Mm-hmm.
playlists. What do you like to listen to?
Mm. Well, we made a few playlists for Head South. So we have a Spotify. I've asked some friends to curate some playlists, and that could be, what's fun about those playlists is like it could be anything from like getting ready to go out and like go on a date to like your first love. Like all of them have different themes and are, curated by very different individuals of very different orientations, genders, ages. And so I really appreciate our Head South playlists. What I personally like to, I have certain music I like to listen to before I go on a date and before I see somebody. And I have music that I enjoy. I like listening to music when I'm having sex how do I want to say it? It's kind of like moody and aesthetic, but not something that I'd be singing along to. 'Cause, like I have a habit of wanting to sing along to music, especially music I love. So it's not familiar enough that you know the lyrics that you're singing along while you're having sex, but
Sure.
it's moody and aesthetic, I would say, and kind of a little bit dreamy and chill, because I think that it should kind of just be in the background. And then after sex, it's kind of nice to kind of just let it kind of play out and lull out. So it has like maybe even like, I tend to like morning sex more than having sex at night, but I think it's just kind of nice after sex to kind of just cuddle and chill and be like comfortable and have something just playing softly in the background. So that's kind of moody aesthetic is what I like to listen to.
I like that. No, I think
Yeah.
lyrics can also be like hard to get out of your head. Like, and I think especially as women, it's like you're already fighting that battle for a lot of
Yeah.
us.
I think everybody experiencing sex, regardless of gender, I know it's easy for us to say, like, as women, we experience that. I think a lot more men experience it than they express, that they get in their heads. And so I think that exactly that, having lyrics or music can be helpful in ways, but it also then takes you out of what you're experiencing with your partner. And then, that's, you want to be in your head, you want to be in your body, you want to be embodied when you're having sex. So I think anything that's going to pull you out of it and distract you is probably not encouraged.
Absolutely. So, can you tell me, I think this is a really interesting question for like lots of people, but do you have a type? And if so, what is that type?
I would say, I feel like it's not necessarily a type, because I feel like if you, like, it's weird, but the people I've dated, if you put them in a lineup, I couldn't really thread together their physical character. Because I feel like oftentimes I'm like curious, like when people say type, like I know people who date certain types of men, and like it's often based off of a physicality or a physical feature characteristic, and I don't have that necessarily. I could say that I've often dated people who were not very tall, but that's not necessarily a type. But then I've also dated people who are very tall, so it's just a funny thing. I would say, in terms of type, I think it's more of like traits, and I can identify as more in my 30s and dating people, the traits that I look for in partners or people that I'm interested in or attracted to are traits of people who are very mindful. They take care of their bodies, care of their minds. They are sensitive and communicative. As I've grown older, like when I was younger, I think I was attracted to people who were more funny. Like that was a very big attraction characteristic. I mean, I still like people who are funny. Everyone I've dated has been very funny. But I think a level of compassion, of consideration. I'm attracted to people who are very outwardly kind or would be identified as very kind people, like a sensitivity.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think people who take care of their bodies so that whatever that looks like or is for them, and people who take care of their minds are my type.
That's a very healthy and positive type, I think, to have.
Yeah, I think. And then other than that, that's kind of it as far as typing. Like they can be whoever they are. I just want like partners who are themselves, like and working towards themselves. A certain level of self-awareness and a curiosity to grow are my types.
Good. You've got good taste, I'd say.
I mean, I don't know if those are type, like if that's a type. I mean, I like also, I find that I have become more attracted to people who are adventurous and like to travel and have a creative eye. Like whatever it is, their aesthetic in all varieties of aesthetic, but also an appreciation for music, art, photography, film, and can have conversations around that because those are things that I appreciate. Yeah.
Yeah. People who keep an open mind about the world, right?
Yeah.
Explore.
Mm-hmm.
That's a very attractive trait, I think. Adventurous.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I can say also, I mean, this is something I've been working on for myself and learning about myself is my patterns. Cause you mentioned that of like, yeah, I tend to go with partners who are stubborn. And so that mean, or could be oftentimes described as difficult and they would self-describe themselves as that, like, oh, difficult to get things out of or set in their ways. I have found that a lot of partners I've been attracted to have been that way. And I'm recognizing and working through like why that is such a magnetic pull towards me and what it is about myself and what I'm working towards in that, like, what am I working from in that space? Why am I attracted to that type?
Yeah.
And so I think for me, and especially, I had an astrologer tell me this, that as I age, my relationships will be ones that push me out of my comfort zone and encourage me to grow. And I can say that for the last 2 that I've had relationships, they've propelled me into growth and motivated me and moved me in a direction and sometimes challenged me to change some of my own set behavior and break those patterns down.
I think those are like the best kinds of relationships. Like you should constantly be challenging each other to grow and supporting each other as you grow, right? It's the hope.
Yeah. Finding someone that can encourage you and see you and not want to fix you.
Yes. That is a big distinction to make. I think this probably will be our last one. We've covered most of our questions. The biggest, perhaps, of all of them. What made you decide to create Head South?
I mean, it's come from a place of, like I said, I wanted to be a sex therapist. I wanted to be a sex therapist when I was 17. So when I started having sex is when I wanted to do that. It was between that and pursuing art and illustration. And I went for art and illustration. But I've always known that sexual health, relational well-being have been important and integral parts of my own being and learning. And like, it's something I've been curious about and wanted to learn about. And so when I was 17 and going through and making those mature decisions, I was also recording that. I had a little green notebook and I was writing about sex and like drawing little anatomical visuals of the vulva and the clitoris and writing about how to give your first blowjob and making this little notebook. It was a mead green notebook. It was like one of those little pocket-sized notebooks, and I illustrated it. I pulled articles. I would go to the library and research. And I wrote all of these things, and then I would pass it around to friends. I remember sitting in like girlfriends' cars and talking about things and how to do things and how to, you know, sorry. I was actually perfect. Yeah. Just writing about and exploring sex and sexuality. And that's always been a passion of mine. It's something I've always wanted to pursue. And, you know, you started the podcast talking about how we know each other, which was through hair care and working in consumer packaged goods together for a long time. And so that, you know, 2 years ago, I've started wanting to leave the industry that we were in, which was hair care. And so it made a lot of sense to me to move into down there and head south and pull the passion that I have for sexual wellness, sexual health, relational health, and put the two together. So bring my expertise and my understanding of packaged goods and my passion for sex and education and sharing information with people to create Head South. And then the podcast is that the version of sex education that I wished I had received and that I think all people should have access to.
Yeah. Yeah, and we've talked about it before too, but like hair care is a crowded space now. And like when we were working at Hair Story many moons ago, it was definitely like a new frontier with clean beauty. But now it feels like there is need for like more sexual wellness and conversations around that and access to these things. So it feels like a space that needs kind of like that refresh and that attention. So it feels like a good place to be looking, and it's already something you love clearly and are passionate about.
No, I feel really good about it. I feel like it's time for a reinvention of sexual wellness, and I mean even an introduction to sexual wellness, because I don't think categorically that category has been described that way. You know, I think people are ready. In the past year since I've been working on this and working on Head South, when I talk to people, I meet people, you know, strangers at weddings and random people at dinners, and I tell them what I'm doing. Everyone's ready to just tell me what they're going through, as if I'm a sex therapist. So that's the funny part, is that like people automatically assume I'm a sex therapist. I'm not. What I love about my perspective on this is that I'm just as curious as everybody else. Like, I'm not the expert. I'm going to try and talk to as many experts as I can, because I have a curiosity. I have a hunger to learn more. And I feel like a lot of people are ready to learn more, or want to express themselves, want to get a better understanding or a deeper understanding about how they can relate to their partners better, how they can relate to themselves and understand their bodies and what they're experiencing, and how to elevate their experience with sex, like deepen their intimacy. And it's just, that's the things that I'm exploring. That's what I'm doing. And I'm pretty sure I'm not the only person out there that's wanting and doing these things. So that's why.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think we're all curious. It's like sometimes like, where do you look? So taking the reins and asking the questions on behalf of everybody else is pretty cool.
Yeah. And I think just giving people permission, like as soon as I say it, it often gives people the permission to be vulnerable and say what they feel and express themselves and tell me pretty intimate things, and, you know, things that maybe they wouldn't normally under any other circumstance. But it's one of those, we're right on the cusp of it, of people ready and wanting and willing to talk about it and wanting to know more.
Yeah, I think so. I think there's definitely a need, and I'm very excited for you in this journey.
Thank you. Thank you for doing this. You kind of filled in last minute. And so I appreciate, we already had a call scheduled just to catch up as friends. And so it kind of worked out perfectly. And I'm very happy that you were able to do this and you agreed to do it and talk to me about it.
My pleasure.
You know, for me, it's very vulnerable to express myself. I think you know this, knowing me for such a long time, that I'm not very explicit about my relationships. And a lot of people in my life could say that, like, a lot of these things that I'm saying out loud in this exact podcast have never been heard by anyone. So I'm a pretty Cancerian reserved person often. And so I'm embracing my Leo cusp and putting myself out there more. And I appreciate that you are the person on the receiving end and someone that I trust, love, and care about, who I can share these stories with, and it feels safe. So thank you.
Oh, well, likewise. It's an honor and a privilege. Yeah, I can't wait to listen to the podcast too. It's going to be great.
Special thanks to all of our guests. Head South is hosted by Cat Meyer, produced by Isis Barlow, edited by Megan Hook, with music by Lily Rezi Rothman, graphics by Ella Chodos Irvine, cover art by Ginaschiappacasse, and intro by Murph Meyer.
If you're looking for me, I'm heading south. All year round I'm going down. Now you know where I'll be, I'm heading south. So come on.